All right, guys, and welcome back to Taking Chances. This week, I've got a really special guest coming on. And guys, I like to fucking repeat myself. It seems like a reoccurring conversation I have on these shows. But boy, the power of networking. So I can't wait to introduce you guys to someone who's became a near and dear friend. I've got Andy Knapick coming in live from, I think, Mishawaka today. I didn't even ask where you're at, Andy. Are you in Mishawaka, Granger area?
I'm in Mishawaka, yes. Beautiful
Awesome,
this
man.
time
How
of
you
year.
doing? I know. I see you got your vest on. I walked outside today in shorts. Yesterday it was appropriate. Today I'm freezing. I feel right at home in Colorado. But Andy, you and I've got so much to unpack, man. So, I want to give our fans a little bit of context. So Mr. Knapick and I go way back to my early stomping grounds at Louie. Although I didn't really know you too well, Andy, so I know we're going to cover quite a bit today, as what we always do on Taking Chances, kind of going through the background. I think I've gotten a chance to get to know Andy as a client, as a colleague, and, as a business partner, and I'd even say a friend, somewhere in between there, Andy. You might want to push back on me on some of that, but I've really gotten a
All
chance
of
to
the
get to
above.
know you. Yeah, all the above and yet to be seen of what's coming,
Right.
I think Andy and I have talked quite a bit too about how similarly we've grown up. For the folks that know me, everyone is kind of thinking, "Oh shit," a little bit as soon as I said that. But Andy, you're honestly, man, I just mean this from the bottom of my heart. You're the exact kind of guest I want to have on the show because, again, as I was telling you before we started to record, the reason I started Taking Chances, and I don't get to talk about the purpose quite often, right? But it's really just to get stories out like yours and mine. Of folks. I don't want to speak for you, Andy, but I'll speak for myself, man. I'm a knucklehead. I used to be a knockaround guy. If I can be successful and get out of my own way, I know anyone can. So I can't wait just to talk to you a little bit today and kind of hop right into the background, Andy. So Andy, before I give it over to you, Andy is the owner of Louie and a bunch of other endeavors, just to give some context. But Mr. Knapick, if you don't mind, talk to me a little bit about who Andy was before Andy, the real estate Andy, the Louie guy, Andy, the guy I love to do some business with. But talk to me about some of your foundation years, man.
Yes, so it didn't really come from much. Kind of bounced around a lot as a kid. I went to 4 high schools in 4 years, so never really had a stable friend group, but went to college and kind of found myself and kind of fell backwards into a career in college athletics doing sports information and spent 7 years doing that. And really it was a very sexy job where, I was one of those kids growing up where ESPN was just on, SportsCenter was on repeat in your household. And so to get to work in college athletics and get to rub shoulders with high profile athletes and guys you've always looked up to from the broadcast point of things and coaches and whatnot. It was a very exciting time in my life. But at the same time, I realized that, it was not necessarily something that I had always dreamed about doing. And when I looked past it, college athletics is something at that time where you do it because you love it, not because it's going to be financially rewarding. And then when, I found the love of my life and started to think beyond what was just a cool job and how I would raise a family and where I wanted to raise a family, I started thinking that I needed to pivot. And that's where, I had finally convinced my brother to come in with me and open up a Jimmy John's and by Notre Dame's campus. And, one store turned into 2 stores, turned into 5, turned into us branching off into Louie, turned into then adding Dunkin' Donuts to the mix. So, in our peak in probably 2017, we had, I think, 34 stores in 3 different states, doing close to $30 million a year in sales. So it's been a wild ride and, I'm a commercial real estate broker.
Well, I want to go back in because I love having these conversations and thank you for the context, right? So I want to go back and just unpack this just for a moment because, again, I know a lot about you and we talk all the time, but I didn't realize that you were in 4 high schools in 4 years.
Yeah,
right. So I kind of want to go back to even you got into the college, right? So I see the beautiful pictures behind. I think it's of the family and the sports of heaven. I know the background story, so it's tough for me because I don't want to glaze over it. But talk to me real quick, if you don't mind, just what kind of endeavor was that like? Because I could just imagine going to 4 different schools, but 4 different schools in high school. And I think you said, transition and friends groups. Because I think that gives me, knowing you a little bit, even some context to hopping into that sports gate right away. But do you mind unpacking that a little bit? I mean, what did those transitions
sure.
look like and what grades were they?
So essentially, in 8th grade, my mom and stepdad and my sister and I moved to Paris, France. His company, Comdisco, was helping to set up the IT infrastructure, whatever IT infrastructure was back in the late 80s, but they were helping to set up for Euro Disneyland out there. So
Okay.
eighth grade, moved out there. Halfway through freshman year, I moved back to Chicago to be with my dad. So I was the first semester I was in a high school in Paris. The second semester I go to Lane Tech High School in Chicago. And then sophomore year, ended up moving to Boston when my stepdad's company relocated back to the States. So that was high school number three, and then high school number four. High school number four was in the Chicago suburbs. Served.
Like, holy shit. So I just want to unpack this for a second. So you just said Paris, Chicago, Boston. And then I think you also said eighth, ninth, and 10th grade. I mean, the most formative years of like
Right.
any young man's life really go.
Right.
What kind of education did that give you? I just got to like, I almost want to pause for a minute because like, and we'll unpack this, right? The sales, the real estate, but like, I got to believe that was a big pillar of the personality that I see in front of me today, because that's got to be challenging as a young man making new friends. I mean, because I'm trying to age myself. That's, what is that, 15, 16, and 17 years old that you're making those big changes into different schools?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing academically was, English, history, those are things that you can like catch up on. Math, it was like essentially coming back from all that. I was ruined in math. Going from seventh grade math in the States to going over to eighth grade math in a foreign language, and it being a couple years ahead of where I was, and then transferring back for all intents and purposes. I gave up on math at that point because I had bounced around so much, and so much of math is building on itself. So early on in my career, I was looking at what kind of careers can you do without having a big math component, and that really took out being like a business major or a finance major in school. And so I kind of struggled in college to find a major that I thought was going to lead to the type of career that I wanted to have. And that's where kind of I was always a good speaker and writer. And that's where being, sports information is essentially public relations and athletics.
Yeah.
And so that was a great transition for me into the career. But at that point, I realized that if I ever wanted to have a house and kind of live life and treat my family the way I wanted it to be treated, that I was going to have to find a way to get out of the rat race. And the one of the things I always tell young entrepreneurs, the thing that got the wheels spinning was just rich dad poor dad was essentially the foundation of how do you not trade your hours for dollars. How do you go out there and get passive income working for you? And still to this day, while I am a commercial real estate broker, somebody's sitting at one of my bars right now drinking a martini, and I'm making money off of that. So it's kind of reading that one book over at this point 30 years ago really kind of changed my life.
So, Andy, I want to go back and talk a little bit about this because, again, I don't want to stick you too much with this, but so I know that probably challenged you in the math with the moving. Is there an argument from your standpoint? Did some of those transitions help you build certain aspects of your personality, maybe at a younger age than most people would? Because I just know for me, I mean, man, like I would have been kicking and screaming. And I know how big you are into sports and then go into sports information, but if I made those transitions at that time, I would assume I'd be kicking and screaming about losing my friends, but then having to make new friends, maybe, and just feel like that probably built some dynamics in your personality. It might have pushed you back in math, but did that help you with some of the socials and just being like, hey, I'm here in a new country and I'm just going to make friends because you didn't have a choice? I'm just curious to ask you that from your perspective. Maybe you never thought about it before.
It was strange because I always look back on that group of friends that we had in France as kind of like the Goonies in terms of like, everybody was in a similar situation to me where everybody, whether or not, a lot of kids were kids whose parents worked for foreign countries, were diplomats, whatnot, or business people like ours. And for one reason or another, you kind of find yourself in an international school and none of us really, we all spoke bits and pieces of either English or French, but we kind of had this group together, and it was very interesting because we all looked at it. It's such a formative age when you're like 13, 14 years old, and then kind of being in this unique situation with people. It was a very formative, and look back on it very fondly, but bouncing around quite a bit socially. it was definitely a tough time. You end up listening to weird, moody music. um,
Yeah, the
they say
the
a
emo
young
years that
man's
come out,
always
right?
gonna gravitate towards the music that he listened to when he was 13 or 14 years old, and for me, it was a lot of Depeche Mode and gothic music back in the day. So
Well, you probably had some of that European influence on you too from back then. I think I
exactly.
know where that comes from. But so transitioning through this too. So obviously, it sounds like the folks have a little bit of quite a bit of experience in business. So I mean, obviously, you got some foundational information there. Tried on the sports information because math wasn't really feeling it. And obviously, interested in sports. Was Jimmy John's like for you guys? Was that the first time where you guys were starting to learn really how business worked? Because I think you said this right before we went into the segment of you loved what you were doing, but you wanted to put your family ahead. We talked about that sports information a bit. Was when you and your brother got into that first business, was that kind of when the wheels started to click of like, okay, this is an endeavor where I can grow and I can grow this operations. Just talk to me about when that transition kind of happened from I had this click, the sports information was it, and then oh boy, yeah, Jimmy John's and Dunkin's, and now we're going to the moon. Just what did that look like and feel like internally?
So part of that for the first time in my life, I mean, I'm 5'8" and a little chubby and never was much of an athlete. And so it was hard to like kind of think that at any point that you were really good at doing something. And the first year we made so many mistakes in that first Jimmy John's, but I started to realize that I could be like the Michael Jordan of Jimmy John's. That like there was nothing that was stopping me from like having the best store in the country and being the best Jimmy John's operator and going out and setting sales records and really it was the first time in my life that I felt like the sky was the limit and I could write my own ticket. And I'd never felt like that before in my life and always just felt like there were other things out of my control holding me back. Whereas once we opened that first store, I felt like I could pretty much write my ticket moving forward.
Was that also the first time when you felt yourself kind of coming into your own as the leadership role, ownership role, kind of starting to build a legacy? Like maybe you tried the shirt on for the first time and started to feel like it fits and see what the outfit looks like, kind of, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, it was, there are times where, in college athletics where I would have some graduate assistants working underneath me and you're in somewhat of a leadership role, but that was completely different than opening up a restaurant and having 30 or 40 employees who are all looking to you for their livelihood. And you always want to see people succeed and grow underneath you, but then firing somebody for the first time when you've never done that in your life and you've never been fired yourself, and it was a tough thing to do. And for me, I always took it personally and it always really pained me to kind of have to do that. But, so it was a big shock from going to really never working in a restaurant to now running a restaurant and being responsible for all these people and responsible for the people that helped us get started and all of our families and knowing that when we opened up we were underfunded and had a lot of bills and all we could do was work our butts off and make sure that it didn't fail. And knowing that if you worked for 2 days without sleeping, that it was like you were doing it for yourself and doing it for your family and kind of like laying a foundation that was going to directly benefit you. I mean, everybody's grinded under somebody else and made somebody else rich, but this was the first time that you felt like if I pull this off, that I'm doing it for myself and the people around me.
Well, and it's worth the work. And I don't mean to smile so much, but I actually wrote this down when you said it because, like, underfunded, little budget is great for growth, right? I mean, I'm smiling because that's exactly how I started Fayou. I mean, and I wish more people
Yeah.
could learn this, right? I mean, Andy, you and I talked about this before. I think so many people that are, again, for the young entrepreneurs that are out there, maybe that watch this show and are thinking about starting the business, there's never the right fucking time, guys. I mean, so
No.
Andy and I were talking about this off air of just so many people convince themselves, right? And I just think about the number one lessons I've learned in life were not the funnest to learn them at the time, But
No.
I think there's no better growth than when you're underfunded, you're under budget and you have nowhere to go besides up. So Andy, I kind of glazed over this when you first got on. We're going over the origination, but I do think something really big for the fans that are watching this to kind of pick up on is just walk me through what you're involved with today, because I kind of glaze over this. I know that you're the owner of Bar Louie. We're going to talk about authority leaders that you and I've got going on towards the end of this. But just talk to me a little bit about everything that you're involved in today and kind of how you maintain that. So I'll guide you through the conversation, but I think I'm curious if people out there, when they hear you say this, are like, how does he do so much? And then I think we can unpack quite a bit with how we do that. But talk to me about what you're involved with today on a full-time basis.
Backing up a little bit, as to why we got out of the Jimmy John's and Dunkin' Donuts business was, and why I transitioned over to real estate was because, we were the type of owners that with, 14 Jimmy John's and 12 Dunkin' Donuts and 3 Bar Louie's at that point, that, if somebody was down a delivery driver or if a manager was sick, it was like we
Yeah.
were in the stores, we were picking up those shifts. And, when you had over 300 employees, it was every day of the week you're putting out fires. And
It's a baby. Yeah, I mean, it's
now,
a kid. Yep.
yeah. And Jimmy told us back in the day, when you lose that passion to be in the stores and have that fire every day for the Jimmy John's or the Dunkin' brand, it's kind of like you owe it to the brand to hand it over to the next person who has that passion for them. And it was like being that Jimmy John's started everything for us. Like all of our foundations, all of our operations that we scaled to Dunkin' and Bar Louie were kind of like our Jimmy John's roots. And so when I had gotten tired of being in that day to day, it was time to hang it up and pass the torch off to another ownership group. And so now what I'm doing is we sub 2 Bar Louie's, 2 very successful Bar Louie's, Granger and Carmel, Indiana. And, I'm really more of a passive partner in that where I touch the stores on a daily basis, but operationally I'm not involved. I use the store in Granger more as my office where I kind of set up shop on a daily basis. But honestly, the thing that allows me to go out and have a career and allows my brother and our other partners to have our careers is, the partnership that we had with HC Resourcing, you and Jen Harb, of being a turnkey solution that allows us to, yes, still be involved in the business and be the ownership face, but not essentially having to run the business. And frankly, had our relationship started, 10 years sooner, we probably still would have owned the Jimmy John's and Dunkin's, because we didn't realize that there were groups out there like HC Resource that would run it as good, if not better than we would, but allow the ownership group to kind of peel back and maybe start another venture, whether it's adding another brand to the portfolio or, I always look back at what if I had started real estate at the same time I was doing the restaurant, instead of having one period end and the other one start. It would have been nice to have a lot of those commissions of opening, 30 plus restaurants.
We might just be getting started, Andy, and I appreciate that shout out, but I'm going to push this right back over to you. I mean, and just to say this to you, I mean, we can't do great work without great owners. And I mean, you've seen me long enough now, right? We started off as colleagues, for my background, for the folks that maybe are just tuning in. Andy and I both came from the Bar Louie group. I used to be a senior director and a vice president. Andy was a franchise owner. So I met a lot of them at conferences back in the day when allegedly I was overserved a few times in Mexico. Maybe Andy and I did that recently in Mexico. I don't know. Allegedly, Mr. Welby, I heard. So is what I was told. But, just to say this back to you, Andy, you guys really care so much about your people. And I mean, you've heard me say this about other clients and people locally that we just won't sign. So we're really focused more on the technology. But when we find a group like yours that cares about people, like also as a small business owner who's been underfunded, lower in budget, right? I mean, kind of getting to know each other. It's easy for me to still get passionate with folks like you. And I think that's what you saw from Jen and I out of the gate was we felt for you guys. We've been there. We've been there with a limitless budget when we worked in corporations. So I know how hard it was to fix, but we couldn't do this if you guys didn't care. And it's fun. And obviously we like to see you guys expand a bit from where you're at. But just to say this, so you are one of the majority owners of the Bar Louie group. So 2 of the most successful units in the network. Bar Louie corporate is going through their own woes, but Granger has been a killer location. Just to say this, guys, I've been in hospitality my entire life. Granger needed a little lipstick on the pig. We caught a couple sticky finger opportunities up there, but the store was running great, Andy. I mean, you guys did some great things with a lot of endeavors going on. And honestly, we have fixed things that are a lot worse with people who have cared, like, not nearly as much as you guys that were there full time, so it was really impressive from Jen and I's perspective. But I think ultimately what I always say to people is if you're in a service business, guys, and you care about your people, it goes a lot further. And I'll give this to you too, Andy. You're in that store every day. I mean, that was a difference of Granger. Just the difference of you being in that store every day, even as your office, like they saw you. Talk to me a little bit about the real estate. I know what you do. I just kind of want the maybe some of the guests to know a little bit more that you are a killer in real estate, commercial real estate at the same time that you're doing this, because that's when I just want to talk about maybe some of the power of networking and how do you put this all together? Because I think the young kids probably are curious to hear that. You've got more than one thing going on, Andy, and they just want to know how to get the first one going. But what else do you do in real estate? And I want to make sure I don't glaze over anything else that you got going on as well.
So, I mean, essentially in real estate, one of my favorite things to do when we were opening new locations is when you buy the territory rights for a QSR like Jimmy John's or Dunkin' Donuts, you're looking at every single trade area that's out there and trying to figure out, can I put a store here? Or if I can't put that store here, where can I put it? And so every trade area you're looking in and just trying to figure out what might be the right fit for there. And so we always had a really good eye for picking out locations and always had our stores always generally overperformed. And once I sold that, it was site selection to me is one of my favorite things to do. And I work with a lot of brands now where it's like they're in the situation where we were a couple of years ago, where it's like, hey, you bought this large territory and you have 2 stores open and you have 4 more stores that you're looking to build, and trying to strategically plan the market. Where do you put the stores? Where does it not cannibalize things? You don't want to force a store, in this trade area that this development is a couple of years down the pipeline. So you want to slow play that. But I really like working with emerging brands and young franchisees and helping them find their next location. One of my favorite things to do is to knock on that little old lady's door and say, hey, you're sitting on a great piece of real estate. Have you ever thought about selling it? And you're trying to secure that location for, a Smoothie King or a 7 Brew Coffee, Dutch Brothers. It's really rewarding to go back in time and kind of put myself in that franchisee's shoes, who we never really had that person, but now it's like I'm kind of a trusted resource for a lot of different brands throughout Northern Indiana. It's, often I get that itch for, man, this would be a great location for me opening up a new brand. My wife is always, trying to steer me away from that, but I do get that itch from time to time to go back into the store level and lead a team and kind of start something new.
It's in your blood. I mean, it's as much as I hate it, like you've probably heard me say this, and I like to pat myself on the back. I like to think our teams are pretty good at hospitality, but I can't stand it. But at the same time, I say I can't stand it. I'm talking to Laura right before I came in to do this podcast with you. I'm like, you should have your mom look at some real estate for a restaurant in Romania. Like I don't think it's ever out of our blood, Andy, once you've done it. It's like it's a little bit of that chaos. Like I love to sleep good, but I also love late nights, so as much as it feels good to get my rest once in a while, I'm like, I'm a little too rested. I should go back into a restaurant.
Right.
I love this conversation, getting to know you. Talk to me about the family for a bit, Andy. I mean, I know the family, you've got to spend some time with you guys, but as a business guy too, just to ask you this, I mean, do you think you could be as successful without your family and your kids? I mean, just curious to kind of put you on the spot with that. Sorry to do it. But...
I mean, so essentially kind of the entrepreneurial bug, I mean, my brother and I essentially, all of my siblings kind of grew up in the backseat of my dad's car. I mean, my dad had a small printing business, and his niche back in the day was essentially he'd go out to meet with you. He never had a storefront, but he'd go and meet with you, take your print order, go get it done, and then kind of deliver it back to you. And so all of us siblings grew up in the backseat of his car, and a lot of times he would drive a cab at night, late night in Chicago to kind of make ends meet. And so, if often we would help snow shovel at office complexes in the winter to kind of make ends meet. And so, so we always had that entrepreneurial spirit. And so my 3 kids, they never, we sold in 2018 when my oldest was 9, and my other, my 2 daughters never really remember us having the Jimmy on
Yeah.
shores. And so that was kind of like a regret, is that the kids never got to see me essentially in my heyday. But as far as the entrepreneurial spirit in them, the three kids have launched Knapick's photo booth, and
Tell
it's
me about.
pretty cool. They have a thriving photo booth business that is doing great, and is kind of helping to fund their 529s and put away money for college, and has taught them all responsibility, and taught them some marketing skills, and taught them negotiation skills, and taught them, hey, if we booked out the photo booth on a weekend where Evan's at a baseball tournament, Audrey's at basketball, and Leah's at softball, and you have to farm it out to one of your buddies and have them run it, now you start to see what it's like to manage employees and have them kind of screw up a little bit here and there.
I
So
love
it's
it.
it's kind of started out small, but we're really glad that the kids have taken this on and taken ownership of it.
Well, I'll say this, that photo booth is badass because I've seen it set up in Granger a couple times. And I think the first time I saw it, I was actually shocked when I found out it was your kids. I was like, whose booth is this? We need to get other places. Someone's like, it's Andy's kid. I was like, no, seriously, whose is it? They're like, no, it's Evan's. I was like they just put it in. Like, no, it's his business. I'm like, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It's just, it's great. So, yeah, it's good to see, man. It's good to see. And I know for myself too. I mean, Andy, we've got a similar, upbringing. I've said this to you before. And I think now, knowing that I've got a little one on the way, it definitely, I wish I did this 5 years ago, kind of like you said with real estate. I thought I was the most motivated man on the planet until I found out I was having a kid. And I was like, oh, there's 3 more days in the week that don't exist. And I just don't sleep now. So it's,
Right.
I, I,
Yeah.
I think the whys for people though are something I really try to connect with. Like one of the things I just tell my guests quite a bit is a lot of times, when I started the show, Andy, I guess for context, was during the pandemic. And I had so many of my friends that were laid off for the first time and they were just terrified. And, so I really started the show to kind of talk to them. Like, I know it sounds weird, Andy, but back in the day, taking chances wasn't just about entrepreneurship. Started off as people that took a chance and during the pandemic and all kinds of crazy ass stories because it was a crazy ass time. But the one thing that was like really prevalent to me was just how, I hate to say this, a lot of my friends that are really good at what they do just lied to themselves about how life is. And what I mean, just about business, right? This employee narrative of like, oh man, it's so scary to do something. And I just saw so many people that had great ideas that just never did anything with them. And it was like this paralyzation with fear. So really when I started taking chances back up, it was more just to get stories of ours out. Like, hey guys, I don't always know what I'm doing. I think I'm very informed and I'm disciplined on what we go after. But I think for the employees that are out there, especially with where the world's going, man, the world's in chaos right now, guys. Like, if you got an idea, there is no fucking better time than today to start. I mean this. The world and everything is changing around you, but we often tell ourselves, Andy, and I'm sure you've got colleagues like this, and maybe we've even done it to ourselves where we wanted to take a chance and we didn't, and then we kind of regret it. And I've just stopped doing that for about a decade. And my life is certainly interesting at times. And sometimes I wish I could have a couple more days off, but I never regret that. I want to talk a little bit about the content and what we're doing right now. And I love this. I actually did my post today. You saw I started back up. Andy and I got linked up. And Andy, I'm going to let you talk about authority leaders, but I'll tell you my perspective, how this got started. Andy and I were working on some content together. For you folks that know, I've had a podcast for a while. We've also helped a lot of our clients with what I would call employer branding marketing, Andy. For the most part, we're taking leadership groups and we're helping them. A lot of groups do good to try to do customer acquisition, but they never think about marketing for the candidates, so we really help them with that. And then we also went adjacent for how we sign clients and just started to do this speech pattern recognition through the podcast and transcript. So I was helping Andy do some content. I don't even remember why, Andy. I'll let you go over. And I know after we did about 2 sessions, you're like, why the heck are you not selling this? And I'm like, I just don't have time. So, but I mean, talk to me a little bit about your content because it's killing right now, but it's because of the great stories you have. But I mean, what was your perspective for how this got started? And I know we haven't gone to market yet, but I think that's changing in the next couple of days.
Yeah, so much of working in real estate is your own personal branding, and developing that Andy Knapick real estate brand. And I've now worked for 2 different real estate companies, and no matter what flag you're flying under, you're essentially your own brand at the end of the day. And just looking at, how do I get my word out there and get my stories out there? I've been doing real estate now for 6 years, and I feel like my skill set of really being that site selection expert, the person who has the eye to put the right concept in the right space was kind of being underutilized, and wondering if a national brand is coming to this market, why are they working with the other broker in the market who's not really the best fit for what they're trying to do? And so I kind of approached you about just how do I develop my personal brand to get my story out there? And, you and I sat down and did a couple sessions where essentially we had a conversation just like you and I are having now, but it was the technology was able to kind of extract my stories and tell it in a way that sounded like it was coming from me and coming from my heart. And so often now I have people who are reading my content and saying like, man, that story you told was speaking directly to me. And so I was kind of blown away with what you showed me, that it's essentially, it's speech recognition and taking my cadence and my thought process and knowing what my pillars are. What are the important things to me as a business operator, as a broker, as a professional, and kind of helping to tell the story the way it needs to be told, where it's got a lesson, it's got a hook, um, you know, and a lot of times people are either able to speak really well and not write well, or there's you who, you've kind of
Yep.
admitted that you speak completely different than you write, and able to have that speaking and writing be one personality and come out through whatever kind of content you're trying to push out.
Well, and you were the first person, so I'll unpack some of this for context for everyone too, because like by no means was I ever planning on productizing this, but just to be transparent and be vulnerable with people because I don't think I've ever said this on tape anywhere, Andy. For about 5 years, I was really struggling with written content on LinkedIn. So again, I was pinned down overseas when I met Laura. I told my team I was going to be gone for 3 months. It was 5 years. None of this was planned. So my wife at the time was like, "Why are you not marketing?" And I was like, "Fuck you." Like literally, like I don't like this sounds weird today, Andy, but I love to talk about what I'm good at, but I don't like to talk about myself. Like this is
Right.
probably everyone's like bullshit right now. I love giving public speeches, but like this took me 5 years. I was confident to talk, but not even on a podcast. Like I would do public speaking at GM conferences or if I won an award or for sports, but it was attached to something like Shaun won something. So he said this, or, I helped someone. So I talked for 15 minutes. It wasn't just like talking. So when I'd write, and I used to be an English literature major, my writing came off very obtuse, and my speaking, obviously from being, an athlete and in restaurants my whole life, I talk crass. I swear too much, but it's me. So long story short, guys, I spent about 5 years working with PR companies just about how to do speech pattern recognition of myself and learn how to write more communicative in a way that I actually communicate when I'm speaking. So like long story, over those course of the years, I got better at writing and better at communicating. So we started to give this to other clients. But Andy, you were the first person. So it's psychological training that we have in, right? It's speech pattern recognition. And again, it's not the AI writing the content. We're actually having Andy tell us stories. And then it's actually educating us how to write the way we speak and for Andy to how to create his writing pattern. But I thought what was interesting, man, is you were the first person I sent the speech pattern recognition to, because it's a bit intrusive, right? I mean, when I did it on myself, it's like, holy shit. It's like you just talked to a psychologist or took an assessment. But what I loved about this is when Andy came back to me, and just to say this to you guys, right? The power of networking. He's like, why are you not selling this? It's now announced. We got HC Core that went to market, right? We're productizing everything that we've done as a service. So I didn't have enough time. End of the story was Andy and I just kind of leaning together and saying, hey, here's what I was doing with this. Here's what Andy wants to do with this. And we kind of put it together in a business. Now, Andy and I are going to get together tomorrow, just to say this to you guys. We've got about 25 people signed up for this. We are actually selling this to restaurant groups before we know exactly what we're doing with it. But when I say this, like doing with it, we both know the education, the speech pattern, the copy. We're just excited to get in people's hands. Like, where do you see this going with authority leaders? Because I think this thing's got fucking legs. I think it's got really big legs. And I want to just talk about your content, because the thing I love seeing doing this, and this will be a good transition piece, Andy. I guess this is the part I should have started with. I didn't know a fucking thing about real estate. So I just knew that the speech pattern worked and I knew that the strategy works. But you were the authority. So again, the only way authority leader works is if you're authority in the area. But what it felt like to me is like it took both of us, right? Because like and I mean this, Andy, I don't know a freaking thing about real estate. Even if you go back to when I bought my house, I was asking you and your brother questions because like it's a gap. Like I know
Sure.
what I know. But I thought that was a really good unison of like it just proved to me that this works. I needed an authority in the space. Some of your content right now, I think your post today is up to 30 to 60 likes, but I mean, where do you see this going from your perspective? And I mean, where would you like to see it go, I guess?
You know, one of the things that I think is so valuable is working at real estate firms. They've often brought in, they hire motivational coaches, or they bring in an expert who teaches everybody about how to have that voice on LinkedIn, how to get yourself out there, how to post regularly, how to get more followers or connections. And everybody leaves and they're all pumped up about it. And then you start to realize that the amount of time and effort and bandwidth it takes to put out good content when it's something that's on your task list that you have to do. Whereas when you and I sat down and we had a half-hour conversation, and just like we're having right now, and we're able to generate a cadence of a Monday, Wednesday, Friday posts they're generating from stories that kind of build upon each other, where it teaches you that, like you said, it's, I have a problem talking about my successes. I don't like to come off as braggadocious. Um, but so it's helped to open me up and talk about my successes. But I've found that some of my most impactful content, the one that's gotten the most engagements, or when I'm vulnerable and I kind of speak about some of my failures. And that would be something that would be very hard for me to do if I'm putting, pen to paper and talking about some of the, I've had a lot of successes, but I've had a lot of losses and a lot of failures along the way. And to me, it's the failures and how you respond to them that end up
That's
shaping
life.
who you are more than the wins. And so the emotion that I'm able to express in the content that's coming out, it's my emotion, but it's stuff that I wouldn't feel confident in my ability to write if I were to say that. But when I'm speaking it and my thought process builds on itself, this conversation builds on the previous conversation that we have, and it starts to get to know me and understand that a lot of times you and I both have self-deprecating humor, that we kind of shit on ourselves as much as we do others.
It's that blue collar grow up, bro. Yeah. It's never going to leave us, I don't
Exactly.
think.
And I think what's real about it is that it is real and it's honest, and it's not like AI slop that you see out there that a lot of content is nowadays. And so I just look at it, whether it's a person trying to develop their own brand, whether it's a company that's trying to talk about their new initiatives, we have the ability now to craft content that speaks directly to who you're trying to speak to, and push out thoughts in a way that generally puts you outside of your comfort zone.
I love this too, Andy. And I ask you this before I go into my TED talk a bit. Does it feel a little bit like it's also building some confidence in the endeavor for you? Like with every statement, not only is the technology getting better, but like you're getting more confident with what you're stating, and probably every statement that you're vulnerable in and it's received well by the audience, you're almost like, fuck yeah, this is the way to go forward. Is that a fair
Well,
assessment?
I mean, it just kind of goes back to the name authority leader. Like I feel like my voice has some authority behind it right now. Like people are telling me how much they enjoy my content and my stories. And I do have great stories to tell, but I just never had the platform to tell them before. And it's so it's I do feel like an authority figure. I do feel that I have expertise in both the real estate and restaurant world. I don't know that there are many people out there that have the background I do. And I'm glad that I'm finally able to tell that story, that I'm like the crossroads of these two different industries, kind of hitting at one, where I can not only help a new franchisee with their site selection, but I can also help them with like, okay, I'm going to hook you up with a great accountant, Bob Frankus with Cirrus
Yeah.
Consulting,
Yep.
and I'm going to help you. This is how you want to structure your business. And so I feel like more than just being a real estate advisor for people, I can also kind of be a mentor for them and help them develop an employee handbook or point them in the direction of HC resource and allow them to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that a lot of times people who are opening up their own franchise were just like us, where you have no experience doing what you're doing, but you're just buying somebody else's recipe for success and trying to put some hustle behind it.
Well, just like you, man, I think I had an epiphany. I'll say this to you and about authority leaders. If people aren't an authority, it doesn't work. So, like, I think, Andy, my epiphany moment is I'm kind of like you in real estate. I just see the authorities in people before they see it in themselves. And not to say like you didn't see it in yourself there, but this is what I've really done with content is like, you've heard me say this probably in our authority leader founder calls. Like, I want it to be about education, guys. I want it to be about education. Cause like the statement you just said in that whole speech is really why I do this of like, I have a congruence to see where people really are and the expertise they have. Like Jen would tell you this of like, I'm like, Jen, you can go out here and do this. She's like, I don't know if I feel the confidence. I'm like, just start trying it. So I think that's the interesting thing about authority leaders too, just to say this though, Andy, is like, it doesn't work if you don't have great stories. Like it worked for you because you had great stories. You were already a leader. You were killing it in two very specialized niche spaces, right? So hospitality, new store openings, and then real estate site selection. I'd say those are two slivers of nuanced information. And the overlap is really interesting, right? And I think the other overlap of now some of the networking that we do together, it's also what kind of like magnetism pulled us together for this opportunity as we continue to do this. And Andy and I have got a 4 to 8 hour session going on tomorrow with authority leaders. I think I'll say this, we'll announce, I mean, I put it in my post, but I think we start letting people in probably around May 1st. Andy and I have got some lipstick on the pig, but I really like the conversation today, Andy. I think this is, you guys are going to be seeing Mr. Knapick quite a bit more from our side. Andy, I'm going to share your socials below. I'm going to make sure we get all that content. I want to say this: Andy's content has been kicking mine in the face. Just to say this, some of Andy's stories are getting hundreds and hundreds of likes. I mean, and again, they're great. So, Mr. Knapick, is there anything you'd like to leave the Taking Chances guests with before we see him on the next episode? Any words of wisdom from today's great TED Talk?
Having watched a lot of these episodes and become a fan of the show, it's really been a pleasure to be on it today, and I hope it's the first of many appearances on here because I really enjoyed this.
Oh, we're going to have lots of conversations. Like I said, Andy, I think after tomorrow, and we'll see what we edit in or edit out. I think in a moment of vulnerability for authority leaders, we'll probably leave most of these statements in. If I can give a takeaway to anyone from today, guys, again, a lot of my clips are going to be releasing. Some of you reached out to me. Actually, Andy, my post today was people were seeing if I was okay on LinkedIn because I hadn't posted in so long. There's a time to build and there's a time to talk. All the clips will be coming out. I really appreciate you guys joining in for these Taking Chances episodes, getting to meet Mr. Knapick. We're going to have him back on. Guys, the power of networking, to go from being a client to a friend to a business partner. It's in all of us. Just have conversations because conversations don't cost anything. Catch you on the next one.